Welcome to E-commerce Revamped, where we break down the hottest trends, insider tips, and strategies shaping the future of e-commerce. Powered by Miva, the engine behind seamless online stores. Now here's your host, Rob Stanley.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of E-commerce Revamped. I'm Rob Stanley, your host, and we got a really special guest today. So everybody has to deal with taxes. In fact, this episode will be coming out probably right around tax time. So felt it was great timing to actually bring into the studio. We're going to be talking to Matt Remuzzi, and from CapForge, and they actually help a lot with taxes and everything. And today we're going to actually talk about stop overpaying income tax as an e-commerce business owner. So let's bring Matt into the studio.
Hey, Rob.
Matt, how you doing?
Good
to see you.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So that's a big ask. Stop overpaying income tax as an e-commerce business owner. Why don't we break this down a little bit with a few questions before we kind of go too deep into this. Let's start off with. I'm going to throw one right at you. Just get going. How can owners save on income taxes? What's the first thing they can do?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing you can do is an easy one, right? If you're an e-commerce seller, then find yourself an e-commerce accountant to work with, right? That's the first thing that's going to help you out to make sure that you're getting the best result, because e-commerce is really kind of its own animal. It doesn't work the same way as your typical main street business. You've got inventory that you might have ordered months ago, you're selling it now. You've got to line those costs up. You've got all kinds of things going on that just the typical business doesn't deal with. And if you go to your typical sort of down the street CPA or tax preparer who's never worked with e-com, or maybe only has one, little person who sells some Etsy stuff on the side or something, they're just not prepared. They're not going to know all the ins and outs of helping you with your situation. It's the same thing, if your eye hurts, you don't go to the dentist, right? If you've got a sore tooth, you don't go to the podiatrist, right? If you have an e-commerce business, go to an e-commerce expert for accounting and taxes, and you're going to get a much better result. That's the first simplest thing you can do to really improve your odds of a good outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got to disclose to everybody. So Matt and his team, I should say, did definitely work on some of my business in the past. No longer owner of any of those business, but it was great having them on board, and they did a lot for us and really opened our eyes to a lot of things. In fact, some of the questions we're going to be talking about are things that I ran into that Matt was able to help with. But Matt, let's kind of kick it off with common tax mistake that some of these e-commerce owners might run into. What are some of those?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the first things that we see that really causes you to have a less than optimal outcome is just not having a good foundation, which is the bookkeeping, right? If your books aren't done well or done properly or set up for e-commerce, and again, you're not super confident in the numbers, you're scrambling at the end of the year to try and put it all together. Well, then the chance of the tax return coming out as good as it can and with the lowest possible number really goes down, right? The chances are you're missing things, you're over reporting things. There's just missed opportunities, not having a good foundation there. It's like, I want to build a beautiful house, but don't worry about it. Just put it right there on that swampy land. Like, well, that beautiful house isn't going to come out very well if you build it on top of a swamp. So the bookkeeping is kind of like the foundation, right? That sets you up for success. Then you can have a great outcome with a tax return because you're pulling in good numbers to start with. And then from there, optimizing the results on the tax return, again, by following sort of the rules of the road that apply to e-commerce businesses and not just sort of generic businesses.
Yeah, I loved your examples earlier. By the way, you don't go to a dentist for an eye problem or something like that. It just, you really do want to be specific, just like, we work a lot with different people that are in the legal area, and they are specifically doing legal stuff for the e-commerce industry. And that means they're keeping an eye on everything. So I love that reply there, Matt, and the examples you gave. Let's dive into how does bookkeeping impact your tax payment? Like how does that impact that?
So there's a couple things that having the books done right can really help you with on the tax side. One is, some of those people use, dashboard kind of software to kind of see what their general numbers are. And that's good as far as it goes, or it can be. But what you're often leaving out is a lot of those other expenses that dashboard has no reporting on. So, things like your home office, cell phone, auto expenses, continuing education, other things that you may be paying for to benefit your business, travel, meals, things like that. Those aren't on your ecom dashboard, but they could very well be legitimate tax write-offs. In the bookkeeping, those can get captured, or if they're not in there, then it's obvious to spot that those gaps exist and we can fill them in. When you're not doing that properly, that can cause problems. The other big thing that happens is, if your books are done on accrual basis, which is typically how e-commerce books are done, you match the sales you had for the month with the cost of goods sold that you shipped that go with those sales. That's accrual bookkeeping. Even if you bought that inventory months ago, that's great. But then if you turn around and hand those numbers to, again, the average tax preparer who just says, great, give me your numbers, I'll use that to prepare your tax return, chances are you're significantly overpaying because they're counting those accrual expenses instead of being able to expense, let's say, all that inventory that you purchased that you're still holding on to, but on a cash basis, you can write off. So being able to file your books or your taxes on a cash basis, even when you keep your books on an accrual basis, is one of those things that an experienced ecom accountant is going to be able to help you with that an inexperienced accountant could easily miss. And we've seen many, many cases of clients who've come to us, and in the past they've paid 25,000, 50,000 or more in income taxes. And we have to tell them, hey, if we had done this, your bill that year would have been literally zero. But
Yeah.
you went to somebody else, they did it on accrual, they just took the numbers you gave them, and you didn't get the best result.
Yeah. So you brought up a good point there on cash versus accrual. So could you break down the difference of what cash is versus accrual so people understand it?
Yeah, and I definitely, I know accounting can get into some jargon, and we're trying to kind of keep it simple and avoid that. But cash versus accrual is one of those things that is important to understand. So, cash basis bookkeeping basically works like your checking account, right? If you got money in, that cash counts as income. And when you spend money, whatever you're buying, right, those expenses count, those withdrawals count as expenses. And you kind of look at that, the sum total of what came in and what went out, and figure out whether or not you had any profit for the year. And that's what you pay your taxes on. Accrual looks at it from the standpoint of you might have made sales today or this month, even if you haven't gotten paid for all of them yet. And you might have sold inventory that went with those sales, and that's the what counts as an expense. Even if you have a warehouse with another $500,000 of inventory, because that didn't get sold yet, on an accrual standpoint, from an accruals basis standpoint, that doesn't count as an expense. So when you're trying to assess the profitability of the business, you absolutely do want to look at it on an accrual basis. And for our bookkeeping clients, we do an accrual every month so you can see really the true profitability of the products you're selling. But then at the end of the year, when it comes to taxes, we'll flip that around and do a cash basis version so that all that inventory that you've got sitting in the warehouse can now become an expense for you, reduce that profit on paper. And when you file your taxes, it might look like you had, no profits or a loss, and now you've reduced your tax liability. So it's just, again, understanding the different ways that you can look at e-commerce and account for it, and optimizing the way you do it for each particular situation. And it's just not something that you see a lot of people outside the e-com world even know, is an option or think about doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up. So a question that'll probably come up, at least I was thinking this, is, you're mentioning cash being able to show, not have to necessarily pay as much in taxes, but does that also reduce the company value when you switch to like a cash basis?
Yeah, good question. So a lot of times, people ask that, well, if I, show a loss on the taxes or no profit on the taxes, isn't that going to really hurt the value of the business? And the answer, thankfully, is no. The buyers are looking at it on that accrual basis. They want to see how profitable it is. That's what they're interested in, and that's what the valuation is based on. When we flip it around to cash and use that for tax reporting, we can show the buyers exactly how that math worked and how it is really just math. It's not that you now somehow are losing money. It's just that when we're following the rules the IRS allows for filing taxes, we can count it one way. But when we want to show how much money the business is actually generating, and when they buy a product for $50 and sell it for $150, at the end of the day, there's $25 of profit left over, we can show that as well. So filing cash basis can save you a lot on the tax filing, but it does not hurt the value of the business, which is kind of the best of both worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a quick question for you, but we're going to take a commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to definitely be talking with Matt more. But the question coming up is you want to stick around for that. I'm going to throw a little quick one at Matt here and have him answer after the break. But can you write off your home office? Let's talk about that right after this commercial break.
Ready to revamp your online store? Miva's e-commerce platform offers powerful tools and flexible solutions that grow with your business. From design to checkout, Miva has you covered. Don't just sell, stand out. Check out miva.com/podcast to start building your dream store today.
Yeah, so be sure to head on over to miva.com/podcast. We've got great downloadables, all kinds of really cool free stuff over there at miva.com/podcast. So right before the break, I was just asking Matt about writing off your home office if you're an e-commerce seller or entrepreneur that's using your home office. And I think that's a question that comes up a lot. Matt, what's the answer to that?
Yeah, it is a good question. And the answer is absolutely. If you're working from a home office, then that is a business expense that you can take advantage of. And that's not just the home office, the percent of your rent or the percent of your mortgage, but it also includes the utilities you're paying for that piece, the internet service that you might be paying for that piece. And then a lot of people use their cell phone as part of, operating their business. They might buy a laptop or a new monitor or printer, all that kind of stuff. All of those things can become business expenses and help you, really minimize the amount that you're paying in taxes. You also can, if you buy your own health insurance because you're an entrepreneur and you're self-employed, if you're set up correctly, the business can pay for that as well. If you use your car in the business, you travel, you go out to restaurants, talk about your business over a nice steak dinner. All of those things can become business expenses. There are a few steps to make sure you're doing it right, and we can help you keep on top of that so you're not crossing any lines. But definitely one of the benefits of being a business owner is you can do a lot of things to help minimize that tax bill that regular W-2 employees aren't able to do. And by all means, we want to help you really optimize that so you can minimize the amount that you're paying in taxes, and then take that money and turn around and invest it back in the business, grow the business, or set it aside, put it in a retirement plan, or take a nice vacation, whatever you want to do with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So my guess is, and at least I'm included in this with, and probably a lot of others, a lot of people are using QuickBooks as their basically way of kind of tracking their business and everything. Uh, Matt, what kind of suggestions can you give of either things you've seen when you guys get into QuickBooks that maybe people can fix before they come to you, or maybe it's something they do when they're originally setting up QuickBooks? What kind of kind of strategies or things that they need to kind of watch out for when they're using QuickBooks?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, you know, just aren't really clear on how it works, right? It's pretty straightforward. You can go in, you can connect your credit card, you see a charge from Home Depot, you go, okay, I'll put that in office supplies. And that's certainly, kind of the start of bookkeeping, but there's a lot more that goes into it. It's easy to kind of screw it up. I've seen people put, you know, things in as bank accounts that weren't really bank accounts, or vice versa. They're entering, loan payments as an expense when really the loan, goes on the balance sheet and the principal isn't an expense, only the interest portion. There's just a lot more to it. And I think Intuit, in some ways does people a disservice, right? They're making it seem like anybody can get the software and become automatically a bookkeeper and be able to take care of their own accounting. You can definitely start it, but I would say we see some pretty tremendous messes that people make by doing it themselves. And it's certainly nothing that we can't clean up and help with. But again, I think, it really benefits you to get some professional help. And I can tell you, a quick story. We had somebody who called us quite a few years ago, 2.2 million in revenue. Ecom business owner had about 320K in net income and wanted a quote. And we gave him, this is what it costs to do the bookkeeping. This is what it costs to do the tax return. And he said, no, 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 that's too much. It's not worth it. I can find somebody cheaper. Okay, no problem. He ended up calling us about 8 months later because he'd gotten a notice from the IRS. He'd already paid about $75,000 in taxes. He got a letter from the IRS saying he owed another about $75,000 more. He called the person he hired to do his taxes and they said, yeah, I don't know. I guess you owe it. What can you do? You got to pay it. So then he called us and he said, all right, well, let's take a look. So we looked into it. And long story short, not only did we not have him have to pay the additional $75,000, we got 100% of what he had paid refunded. So he went from having to owe $150,000 to owing $0. And that really kind of changed his mind on, what's the value of paying for a bookkeeper and a tax preparer who understands e-commerce and knows what they're doing. Yes, he spent about $5,000 with us, but it saved him $145,000 versus what, going with the other cheaper option had originally cost him. And of course, he didn't get his money back from that. So, it really pays to work with experts to, get the best results. And, you can save a few bucks today, but you may not realize it's costing you or it could be costing you thousands or tens of thousands of dollars down the road by not getting it right.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great story, and that falls right in line with our topic of stop overpaying income taxes as an e-commerce
Exactly.
business owner, right? So that's
Exactly.
perfectly right in line with that. But one other thing I want to ask also is, besides tax strategies, what are kind of some of the other ways the companies can build their value up?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think one of the things we see pretty often is, when you're first starting out, you're kind of watching every single expense, every software subscription, every SKU you're selling. You want to make sure it's really pulling its weight. But, you've only got 3 or 4 SKUs. Maybe when you're starting out, you only have a couple software subscriptions. What happens over time is you start to get more bloated, right? You start to sign up for things that you haven't, and then you haven't used it in a while, but you don't cancel the subscription. You start to have tons of SKUs that you're offering. Maybe not all of them are still profitable, but you don't get rid of them. You're not kind of monitoring it at that level. You're just not as careful as you used to be because you've just got a lot of things going on. So one of the things that we see is it really pays to be vigilant and continuously kind of review, is every SKU I'm selling pulling its weight? Is every SKU I'm selling, am I buying it at the right price, selling it at the right price? Am I making sure that I'm making at least a minimum margin? And all this software I'm signed up for, all these recurring subscriptions, because everything's a subscription now, right? Am I still using all these? Am I still getting value out of them? Do they still make sense? And really just keeping a closer eye on your business, because it's easy to go from, I'm making a decent profit to, well, my profit margin's kind of shrinking. Maybe I don't feel it as much because the business overall has gotten bigger and the same or more dollars are coming in, but the margin's really shrinking. If you can stay on top of that and make sure you're continuously running a lean, mean operation where everything you're doing is contributing to the bottom line, not only are you going to have a lot more value in the business the day you decide to sell it, but in between now and then, whenever you do sell it, you're bringing more in, and the time you're spending is being rewarded at a much greater rate than if you kind of, get a little lazy and start to let things go, slip by the wayside, not pay as much attention. That's the number one thing I see. And, the bigger e-commerce guys, the ones who've gotten over the hump and, they're past the point of trying to figure out if this thing's even going to work. And now they're kind of working on just let's continue to grow and expand. But stuff falls by the wayside and they're just not running as lean and mean as they used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, what they just came to mind, and that is, you know, how important is it for sellers, e-commerce sellers, to really understand their actual true cost of their products?
Yeah, I mean, that's the single biggest sticking point that we see where people are, probably under counting what things cost because, certainly you know what you bought it for and you know what you're selling it for, but there's so much leakage that can happen in the system, right? You order 1,000 but only 982 units get delivered because of whatever, they left them off the pallet or something, somebody miscounted, and then some of those are damaged, and then some of the ones you sell get returned, and some of those returns are unresellable. And all those little things take a little bite out of your profits and add to your cost of goods sold. But if you're not kind of factoring them in, you're still using that back of the napkin. Well, I bought it for $10, I sell it for $30, so I must be making X amount, after ad spend and whatever else. It just isn't true anymore. And it doesn't take a ton of slippage and shrinkage to go from this business makes decent money to, boy, this things are getting really tight, or I'm, even have some upside down months where I'm losing money. So 100% keeping track, having a good system and keeping close track of that cost of goods sold is the single biggest sticking point, single biggest critical point of failure I see in e-commerce business. The money coming in, the sales is pretty straightforward. Ad spend and other expenses, it's pretty straightforward to see how much you're spending each month and where the money's going. But that cost of goods sold number, that can sometimes be kind of a black box if you don't really pay attention to it. And that's the single biggest place where I see people really losing money that otherwise they should be, realizing in profits, just slipping away out the door.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's true. Knowing your actual cost, landed cost, or to your door cost, or to the warehouse cost is vital. And the reason I brought that up is because, if you're looking to actually sell your business, you're going to need to have those numbers in place. So that brings up a good point. But maybe besides the numbers, knowing your actual cost, Matt, what other things should people do or know to do if they're preparing to sell their e-commerce business?
Yeah. So, I mean, aside from having really good, accurate, up to date current numbers, because that's the number one thing buyers are looking at. The number one thing that a business sells for is based on how much cash flow and profit is it producing. And you want to have that number nailed down and current and accurate and by the month. But if you've done that, then the next most important things you can do is have some systems in place, have some documentation for how the business works, make it easy for someone to come in and take it over. Get rid of that stale inventory that's not moving or slow or sitting around the warehouse. Get rid of those subscriptions that you're not really using anymore. Make sure that, again, your team is really just down to the essential people. You don't have somebody that's sort of not really pulling their weight, but you haven't, just make everything as tight and as on point as you possibly can, so that everything is humming along. And then have a good process documented in place so a new owner can come and see exactly how you do things, where you buy things, how your shipping process, your vendors, everything that you're using, so they can feel like, hey, this would be really easy for me to come in and take over and be successful with. The more you're sort of chaotic and undocumented and messy, sort of fire drill situation where every day seems like a new day for you, that makes buyers nervous. It makes them less inclined to pay the maximum sort of premium price that you might otherwise get. And it really does kind of hurt the long-term value of the business. So run a tight ship, stay on top of your numbers, and you'll have no problem finding plenty of buyers willing to pay a very nice price for your business.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I just thought of, we got a lot of changes happening right now regarding just a lot of things that are affecting e-commerce sellers, Amazon sellers, just sellers in general. Is there anything you're seeing, Matt, that maybe could affect sellers on, let's say, the tax side, or things that might affect them on write-offs or something like that? What are you seeing coming up this year that might affect some of these e-commerce sellers?
Well, I mean, with the new administration, and, talk about different tax breaks, different tax changes, tax law changes, it kind of remains to be seen. I think everybody right now is a little bit holding their breath to see what these changes are going to be. It certainly sounds like some of the tax law changes could be advantageous to business owners, but at the same time, if depending on what happens with tariffs and other things, making products potentially more expensive, that could be the flip side to that. So I think right now the best strategy is just to really, again, run a tight ship. Make sure that you've got everything in your business buttoned up and it's as profitable and as efficient as it can be. And then if some costs do go up, things slow down a little bit, you'll be more prepared to weather the storm. And if on the flip side, there are tax law changes that come in that are more advantageous, we're going to be right on top of that, making sure that we can, advise our clients on how to take advantage of those and make the most out of it. But right now, I think we're kind of all in a little bit of state of flux, wondering, how things are going to shake out. And nobody, as far as I know, has a full crystal ball to see exactly which way things are going to break.
Absolutely. Well, you bringing that up is a great segue to tell everybody a bit more about what CapForge does, what kind of services you guys offer, who you offer it to, and then go ahead and tell everybody after that, how to get a hold of you guys.
Yeah, for sure. So, we've been in the bookkeeping and tax game for a long time, specializing in e-commerce sellers. We work with all kinds of people from, people just getting started, kind of launching into e-commerce, to people who are omni-channel sellers, on all different platforms and doing wholesale and direct to consumer and everything else. So no matter what the e-commerce business model you might be involved in, chances are we have dozens or even hundreds of clients doing the exact same thing. And we work with our clients on the bookkeeping side to make sure the numbers are right, on the tax side to make sure that we can get that number as low as humanly possible. And then on the advisory side to say, okay, what else can you do to help improve your business performance, get more out of it, grow, be more efficient, be more profitable. So we work with e-commerce sellers across the board on that financial and accounting picture that, they're all sort of focused on, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all focused on, can we make this thing make money and be profitable and continue to grow our business and sleep well at night, knowing that there's plenty of cash flow and plenty coming in, and we're going to be able to, continue to grow and be successful. So that's kind of what we're focused on, is e-commerce sellers on the accounting side. In terms of getting in touch with us, for email, info@capforge.com is a great way to connect with us, or just visit the website, capforge.com. You can find out a lot more information. We've got our pricing on there, our services, everything else. And of course, the contact form, great way to reach out as well. It's always a free consultation, free review. We want to make sure we're a good fit for you and vice versa. Figure out what we can do for you, what we can offer. And then if, we do decide to work together, it's transparent pricing, fixed price, flat rate quotes. So everybody knows exactly what they're getting before we even start. But that's kind of it. We've enjoyed working with this community. It's been a great ride for us, and looking forward to many, many more years to come of e-commerce accounting.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I personally recommend Matt and his team at CapForge. I've used them in the past. They're absolutely great at what they do, always on top of everything. For those listening, it's CapForge, CapForge.com, CapForge.com. And you can, like I said, reach out to them at info@capforge.com if you have any questions or you want to set up a consultation or just get some more information. Matt, I really appreciate you having you on the podcast. I always get a chance to get you on at least one of my podcasts every time I start a new one. So I appreciate you jumping on and giving all this great information. Timing's perfect because we got tax coming up here pretty quick, and this will be out right before it. So everybody, please take advantage of getting hold of CapForge. And Matt, thanks again for being on the podcast. And everybody, I'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks for tuning in to E-Commerce Revamped. Ready to take your e-commerce business to the next level? Visit Miva.com for the tools to build seamless online stores and unforgettable customer experiences. Until next time, keep your cards full and your customers happy.